She told me my body, my rules. Don't touch me. I swallowed the pain, until the day I replied, my money, my rules. Don't ask me. That's when everything between us truly broke, and slowly, we had to learn how to piece our hearts back together. I remember the first time I noticed something was changing between us. It wasn't a loud argument, or a dramatic scene. It was something much quieter, something that crept in slowly, like shadows stretching longer as the sun begins to set. She and I used to have these little rituals, small things that made life feel warmer. I'd reach across the dinner table, brushing her fingers just to let her know I was there. Sometimes, without even realizing it, she'd lean her shoulder into mine when we sat together on the couch. Nothing grand, nothing people would call romantic gestures, but for me, those touches meant the world. They told me she trusted me, that she was comfortable resting a part of her world against mine. But lately, she started pulling away. It was subtle at first. I'd place my hand on hers and she'd gently slip it away, pretending she needed to reach for her glass of water. Or I'd lean toward her, and she'd shift slightly, creating just enough distance that I'd notice. That night at dinner, the air felt heavier than usual. The clinking of her fork against the plate sounded sharper, somehow louder in the silence between us. I reached out, not even thinking about it, just my fingers brushing across the back of her hand. A touch that once would have been welcomed with a smile. But this time, she froze. She pulled her hand back quickly, setting her fork down with a firm sound. Her eyes finally met mine, and there was something in them I couldn't ignore, a mix of exhaustion, frustration, and something softer too, though she tried to hide it. And then she said it. Her voice was steady, almost too steady. My body, my rules. Don't touch me. For a moment I didn't know what to do. My throat tightened, and the words I wanted to say got stuck somewhere deep inside me. All I managed was a small nod, and I drew my hand back into my lap, feeling the weight of emptiness where her skin had just been. The silence after that was unbearable. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, even the sound of my own breathing, shallow and uneven. But what I couldn't hear anymore was her laughter, her warmth, that unspoken closeness we used to share. I wanted to argue. I wanted to ask her why. But instead I stayed quiet. Not because I agreed, but because I was afraid of pushing her further away. That night, when we went to bed, she turned onto her side, her back facing me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, steady but distant. I could have reached out, placed my hand on her shoulder like I used to, but the echo of her words held me back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. It was a few days later when the next crack appeared. By then, the silence between us had grown heavier, almost like a third presence in the house. We weren't fighting, not in the loud, explosive way people imagine. No, this was worse. This was the kind of silence that eats away at you, that fills every room even when no words are spoken. I was sitting at the table, going through some paperwork, when she walked in. She looked tired. Not in the physical sense, but in the way her shoulders sagged slightly, in the way her eyes avoided mine as if meeting my gaze might cost her something she didn't have to give. She cleared her throat gently, and then, almost cautiously, she asked me for money. Not much, just something she needed for a small household expense. Normally, I wouldn't think twice. I'd always given without hesitation, because that's what partners do for one another. But something in me, something bruised and aching from the words she had thrown at me days earlier, twitched. And before I could stop myself, I said it. My voice was calm, almost too calm. My money, my rules. Don't ask me. The second the words left my mouth, I felt them slice through the air. They didn't just fall between us, they landed with a weight I couldn't take back. Her head jerked up, her eyes finally locking with mine, wide in disbelief. For a moment, I thought she might speak, might shout, might cry. But she didn't. Her lips parted, then pressed into a thin, trembling line. Her silence was louder than any argument we could have had. She just stood there, frozen, as if the man she thought she knew had suddenly turned into someone else. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to hold her gaze. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the words. It was about the ache that had been festering inside me since the night she said, "My body, my rules." I wanted her to feel my hurt, to know how sharp her rejection had been. But as soon as I saw her eyes, I regretted it. The pain reflected there wasn't victory, it was devastation. She turned slowly, her footsteps dragging as she walked out of the room. The sound of her retreat echoed in the house, and then, nothing. Just silence. I sat there, my heart pounding, the papers on the table blurring as I stared down at them. My hands clenched into fists, not out of anger, but out of shame. I had tried to defend my heart, but all I'd managed to do was wound hers deeper. That night, the distance between us wasn't just emotional, it felt physical. Two people lying in the same bed, but with miles of unspoken words stretching between them. Her back was turned to me again, her breathing steady, while I stared into the dark, replaying my words over and over. Regret has a strange way of lingering. It doesn't just visit you in the quiet hours of the night, it follows you through the day, in every glance, every silence, every memory that comes uninvited. After I told her those words, "My money, my rules. Don't ask me," I couldn't escape them. They replayed in my head with every step I took. And every time, I wished I could take them back. But pride held me hostage. Instead of apologizing, I buried myself in distractions. I stayed longer at work, scrolled endlessly on my phone, even pretended to be busy just so I wouldn't have to look into her eyes and see the hurt I'd put there. But the truth is, even when I avoided her, she was everywhere. I'd walk past the hallway and catch the faintest trace of her perfume, clinging to the air like a ghost. At night, I'd roll over and feel the empty space on the bed where she once rested her head on my chest. My hand would drift there, brushing against the cool sheets, and my heart would ache at how far she felt, even while lying only inches away. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd hear something that broke me more than anything, soft, muffled sobs from behind the bathroom door, or from her side of the bed when she thought I was asleep. And every time I heard her cry, I froze. I wanted to rush to her, to hold her, to whisper that I was sorry. But instead, I stayed still. Cowardly still. I'd tell myself, "She hurt me first. She pulled away. She said those words." And in some twisted way, I convinced myself I had the right to hold back, to let her feel what I felt. But deep down, I knew the truth. My pride wasn't protecting me, it was punishing us both. The worst part wasn't the silence, or the tears. It was the memories that haunted me. I'd be washing dishes and suddenly remember the way she used to come up behind me, slipping her arms around my waist, her cheek pressing against my back. I'd be sitting on the couch and picture her laughter, her head tilted back, her hand resting lightly on my thigh as if it belonged there. Those memories weren't just moments. They were reminders of everything we'd lost in the space of a few sharp words and stubborn pride. One evening, I caught a glimpse of her standing by the window. The sunset cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the quiet sadness in her expression. For a second, I saw her not as the woman pulling away, not as the person I'd hurt, but as the woman I fell in love with, the woman who once trusted me enough to share every part of her heart and body without hesitation. And in that moment, I realized something that terrified me. If I kept letting pride win, I might lose her for good. I thought I had stood up for myself. Instead, I had just built the wall between us higher. It was close to midnight when I found her in the kitchen. I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling again, listening to the restless rhythm of my own thoughts. Sleep never came easy anymore. The distance between us, the silence, the weight of my words, it all pressed down too heavily. When I got up to pour myself some water, I didn't expect to see her there. She was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The steam curled upward, soft and ghostly in the dim glow of the kitchen light. Her eyes were red, the kind of red that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from tears shed when no one is supposed to hear. She didn't look up when I entered. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure if I should say something or quietly turn back to the hallway. But my feet carried me forward, slow and careful, as though I might startle her if I moved too quickly. I pulled out the chair across from her, the scrape of wood against tile sounding far too loud in the quiet room. She didn't protest. She didn't push me away. She just kept her eyes fixed on the tea in her hands. We sat there like that for a while. No words. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the delicate clink of her spoon against the cup. Finally, she spoke, so softly I almost didn't hear her. "I don't know how to compete with time." I frowned, unsure what she meant. But when her gaze finally lifted to mine, I understood. Her voice wavered as she continued. "You're young, full of energy, full of years ahead of you. And me? Every day I look in the mirror, I see it. Lines where there used to be smoothness. Hair that doesn't shine like it once did. Skin that doesn't." She trailed off, shaking her head as if the words were too heavy. "I feel like I'm fading while you're just beginning. And I can't stand the thought of you looking at me and wishing I was someone else." Her confession pierced me deeper than her earlier rejection ever could. All this time, I thought she had been pulling away because of me, because she didn't want me anymore. But here she was, admitting the truth. She was afraid she wasn't enough. I wanted to reach across the table, to take her hands in mine, to tell her she was still the most beautiful woman I had ever known. But I held back. Her words still lingered in my chest, and I didn't want to break the fragile honesty she was offering by rushing too quickly. Instead, I gave a small nod, my throat too tight to form anything more. The steam from her cup drifted upward, blurring the space between us, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like the wall was cracking. Like maybe, just maybe, she was letting me glimpse the vulnerability she had been hiding behind her strength. And though I said nothing, my heart whispered what I couldn't yet. I don't want someone else. I just want you. The days that followed felt different. Not healed, not fixed, but softer somehow. Her late-night confession stayed with me, echoing in my mind every time I looked at her. I realized then that what she needed wasn't grand declarations or desperate pleas, it was patience. A reminder, in the smallest ways, that she was still cherished. So I started quietly, almost invisibly. In the mornings I poured her coffee before she asked. I remembered the way she liked it, 2 sugars, just a touch of milk. I'd leave it on the counter for her with no words, no expectation, just a quiet offering. At first, she didn't acknowledge it. She'd pick it up, sip it silently, and move on with her day. But I noticed the smallest pause in her movements, the way her shoulders relaxed ever so slightly as the warmth reached her hands. I began leaving small notes too. Nothing elaborate, just little reminders scribbled on scraps of paper. Drive safe. Don't skip lunch. Or sometimes, thinking of you. I never signed them, but she knew they were from me. One morning, I found one of those notes tucked carefully into her book, the corner of it sticking out as though she wanted it close but not on display. Slowly, the ice began to crack. One evening, we sat at the table together. It wasn't planned, we just happened to end up there at the same time. I passed her the salt without her asking, and as she reached for it, her fingers brushed against mine. For a moment, neither of us pulled away. It was just a second, but it felt like something new, or maybe something old, returning quietly. And then it happened. A laugh. Small, unguarded, but real. She was telling me about something silly that happened at the grocery store, the kind of story she used to share all the time before the distance grew. Her laugh slipped out before she could stop it, and when I heard it, I almost forgot how to breathe. It had been weeks since that sound filled our home, and I realized how much I had missed it. The moment was brief, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that she was still there, beneath the layers of fear and hesitation. Enough to remind her, maybe, that I wasn't going anywhere. Later that night, as we sat on the couch, the space between us felt less like a wall and more like a fragile bridge. Our knees touched lightly, accidentally at first. But this time, she didn't move. She stayed. And though either of us spoke about it, My heart thudded in my chest as if it knew we had just taken the smallest, most important step back toward one another. No apologies yet. No dramatic reconciliation. Just these little gestures, quiet threads weaving us back together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. It was a rainy evening when everything finally came to the surface. The kind of rain that doesn't just fall, it lingers, steady and soft, tapping against the windows like a quiet metronome. The house felt wrapped in it, like we were alone in a world made only of water and shadows. We were sitting at the dining table, either of us really eating. The silence wasn't sharp like it had been before. It was gentler now, but still heavy, as though both of us were carrying words too fragile to release. I watched her stir her spoon in her cup, though the tea had long gone cold. My chest tightened with the weight of everything unsaid, and before I could lose my courage again, I broke the silence. I didn't mean what I said about the money. The words hung there, simple but raw. Her spoon stilled, and she looked up at me slowly, her eyes unreadable. My hands clenched against the edge of the table, my voice rougher than I intended as I continued. I was hurt. That night when you said, "My body, my rules," I felt like you were pushing me out. Like you didn't want me anymore. And instead of telling you how much that broke me, I threw those words back at you. I thought I was protecting myself, but all I did was wound you deeper. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. The rain outside grew heavier, streaking down the glass as though the sky itself carried our unspoken sorrow. Finally, she whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the storm. It wasn't about you. I frowned, leaning forward, urging her silently to go on. She swallowed hard, tears gathering in her eyes. When I pulled away, it wasn't because I didn't want you. It was because I was scared. Every day I look at you, I see youth, strength, all the years ahead of you. And then I look at myself, and I see what time is taking. I was terrified that you'd notice too, that you'd see me as less. I thought if I pushed you away first, it wouldn't hurt as much when you left. Her confession shattered me. Not because of her fear, but because she didn't see what I saw, didn't see how breathtaking she still was, how every line on her face told a story I wanted to know by heart. Without thinking, I reached out. Slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. My hand brushed over hers, my thumbs circling lightly across her knuckles. She didn't move. She just let out a shaky breath, her tears slipping free. You don't understand, I whispered. It was never about age. It was never about time. You're the only one I see. The only one I want. Her hand trembled beneath mine, but then, almost tentatively, her fingers curled around my own. The connection was fragile, but it was real. And in that moment, with the rain surrounding us and our hands bound together, I felt the silence between our hearts finally begin to break. The storm outside had quieted by the next night. The rain was gone, but the world felt washed clean, the air softer, fresher. Inside, something between us had shifted too. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect, far from it. But there was a gentleness, a closeness, that hadn't been there for a long time. We were sitting on the couch, the room lit only by the soft glow of a lamp. She leaned slightly against the armrest, a blanket draped over her lap. I sat beside her, closer than I would have dared weeks ago. Close enough to feel her warmth, close enough to catch the subtle rhythm of her breathing. For a while, we didn't speak. And then she turned her head, her eyes meeting mine. They were still damp with traces of emotion, but this time, there was no wall between us. No shield. Just her, raw, honest, vulnerable. I was wrong, she said softly. When I told you not to touch me. I didn't mean I didn't want you. I just didn't know how to face my own fears. I swallowed, my chest tightening at the sound of her voice. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees, searching for words that could hold the weight of what I felt. Your body is yours, I said carefully, my voice low. Your rules, always. I'll never take that away from you. But my heart? That's yours too. No rules, no defenses. Just yours. She blinked, her lips trembling as if she wanted to smile but couldn't quite manage it through the tears welling up again. And then, slowly, she shifted closer. Her arms slipped around my waist, tentative at first, then firmer as she pressed her cheek against my chest. I froze for a heartbeat, overcome by the flood of sensation, the warmth of her body against mine, the soft strands of her hair brushing my jaw, the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat syncing with my own. I wrapped my arms around her carefully, almost reverently, holding her as though she might break if I wasn't gentle enough. My chin rested on her hair, and I breathed her in, the familiar scent of her perfume, mixed now with something softer, something that felt like home. We stayed like that for a long time. No words, no explanations. Just two people rediscovering the comfort of being held, of belonging again. Finally, she whispered, her voice muffled against my chest. "And my money?" I laughed quietly, the sound breaking the tension in the room. Pulling back just enough to look at her, I brushed a thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear. "Your smile," I murmured. "That's the only wealth I care about." She shook her head, a tearful laugh escaping her lips as she leaned into me again. And in that moment I knew, despite our flaws, our pride, our fears, we had chosen each other again. Not her rules. Not my rules. Just our love.